Afternoon, friends and family of the Memphis Zoo. We're so glad to have you here today in our wild animal encounter. Today we have an animal for you that's an amphibian. His name is Eric. Now, just a little note before we get started with Eric and talking about conservation, being this week's theme, we do want to take a moment to talk about being safe at home. So, here at the Memphis Zoo, we take all necessary precautions. We wear face masks and gloves when we're working with our animals and make sure to sanitize regularly. Now, what you can do at home is to stay an appropriate social distance away from other people, stay at home inside as much as you can, and to make sure that you take the appropriate precautions with masks and gloves when you go outside. Now, with that out of the way, let's go right in with our frog friend today. Now, this is a smooth-sided toad. You may notice I called him a frog. Well, that's because, sort of like squares and rectangles, all toads are also frogs. However, not all frogs are toads. You can see a few of the things that make Eric a toad. He has warty skin. These little bumps on his back actually help with respiration and are filled with something called a bufotoxin, which makes him undesirable to predators. He's not very tasty. A few more things is he has a different posture than toads. As you can see, he's hunkering down right in there trying to get comfy. And one last major distinguishing characteristic between frogs and specifically toads are the texture of their skin. That's right, these guys are a little bit drier and they do love moisture just like frogs, so we make sure that when we handle them, we spray with amphibian safe water. Now, right now, I'll introduce a few fun facts about Eric. He's about 2 years old, he's a male, and he is about full size. Females can actually get to 2 to 3 times his weight. So ladies, definitely the boss in this species. As I said earlier, he's what's called a smooth-sided toad. Many other North American toads, unlike him, he's an African toad, have very warty skin, lots of bumps, and lots of different features on their back. As you can see, he's relatively smooth, which makes him very good at hiding in small burrows and holes, waiting for insects to come by. Well, now I'd like to open it up to some questions, if you have anything that you'd like to know about Eric in particular, and then we'll move on to conservation questions only for the last half of the Wild Encounter.
Okay, so people are really just commenting on on the fact that they're a little confused that frog or toads.
Yes, I'll try and go through that again. So, as I said earlier, a square and a rectangle, if y'all had that in geometry class, all squares are also rectangles. Now, the frogs that you may see outside are not necessarily toads. However, toads who have a different kind of posture, they'll have usually a more upright sitting posture. He wants to be burrowing right now, but if he's up and moving around, he'll have his head upright about this high, whereas most frogs will lay flat as they can. In addition, most toads are ground-dwelling species. They are terrestrial. There are very few toads that like to go into water for extended periods of time, unlike frogs, which may choose to spend a lot more time in water, even after they've left their tadpole life stage. And in addition, there's a couple things that people think about when they see a toad. One is, oh, I might get warts if it touches me. Well, that's not entirely true. However, we would recommend here at the St. Louis Zoo, if you encounter wild animals, to observe them from a safe distance. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we've got a greeting from 1A6 and Mateo H2, who also sent us 100 stars. I want to say just a quick hello.
Hi, well, hi Mateo and friends. Thank you for your stars. You are a star for donating to the Memphis Zoo, and thank you so much for tuning in.
And of course, we got a hi from Sidley, age 7, and Sharon, all the way in Tuscan.
Wow, thanks for tuning in all the way. Well, we hope that you're enjoying the show. Just another quick fact about Eric. He actually is a scientist. Now, a few weeks ago, I brought one of his lab partners, who was Charming. These guys were involved in captive breeding studies, in human care breeding studies here at the Memphis Zoo, where these guys were looking at reproductive studies and comparing them to some endangered species, such as the dusky gopher frog, which are bred right here at the Memphis Zoo and released in Mississippi.
Well, we do have some questions popping up. Lily, age 6, and Clara, age 4. They want to know, does he have any predators? And if we kiss him, will he turn into a prince?
No, he does not turn into a prince, even though his brother is named Charming. However, there are lots of predators which will go and have frogs and toads as tasty snacks. These usually include medium to large sized mammals such as coyotes, foxes, and birds of prey such as eagles, hawks, or other raptors. Now, this guy himself has a few defense mechanisms to help stave off predators. One is that bufotoxin we talk about, which once a predator grabs him, the bufotoxin will be released and it will taste very bad, and hopefully the predator will spit him out. Next is they're able to discharge water from their backsides and jump away. This will startle a predator, and hopefully he'll be able to make a speedy escape. He doesn't move much right now because he's very comfortable in the sun, getting nice and warm, but if he did spot a threat, this guy would be able to bound pretty quickly and find a hole or some other small space to hide in.
Okay, well, we got another friend here. Ashton, can Eric see colors?
That's a very good question. So my guess, as I don't know the exact answer of what colors he can or can't see, is that he wouldn't be able to see as many colors as we would. Now, to frogs and toads, they are mostly nocturnal species, which means they prefer to be out and active at night. This means that his eyes are more sensitive to movement and light than they are colors, because it's more difficult to see colors at night. So he'd be very good at spotting potential predators moving in on him, and very good at spotting potential prey species. Now, getting into prey species, one of his favorite snacks here at the Memphis Zoo is crickets. So I have a few crickets, which I'm going to see if he's hungry and he'd like to eat.
All right. And while we're seeing Phil eat, Braxton wants to know, why are you wearing gloves?
So I'm wearing gloves for a couple reasons. One is because here at the Memphis Zoo, we take all necessary precautions to prevent the spread of coronavirus. So we wear these at all times while we're here working at the zoo, in contact with our animals and our coworkers. However, the other reason is because frogs and toads actually have very sensitive skin. So they can actually breathe and absorb water through their skin, which means that any gunk that we have on our hands can potentially be absorbed into their body. And because we want to have the healthiest frogs and toads, there we go, thanks Eric, healthiest frogs and toads we can here at the Memphis Zoo, we wear gloves and spray ourselves with amphibian safe water.
Well, that's really interesting. We've got Cora, age 6, would like to know, how old is Eric?
That's a very good question. Now, we don't know Eric's exact age, but we got him at the zoo about a year and a half ago, and he was fully grown and mature by that time. So I would guess that he's somewhere in between 2.5 to 4 years old. Again, he's full size, and it would be very different to tell his exact age just by looking at physical characteristics.
And Tasha just sent us another 100 stars. Thank you, Tasha.
Thank you very much, Tasha.
And one, age 6, would like to know, what kind of toads do we have here in Memphis that he can find?
That's a very good question. So a few of the frogs and toad species that we have in Memphis include the American bullfrog, which is a very large-bodied toad, which has a distinctive ribbit that you might hear at night. Second, there are leopard frogs, which are my favorite species of frog. These frogs have 2 gold lines down their back and lots of spots, just like a leopard. And they're a lot of fun, and you'd be able to find them at ponds and small bodies of water. All toads and frogs that we have that are native, trying to get him more lunch.
So we can see what's going on over here.
One sec while I get him.
It's tough on that
very
cricket
active right now.
Oh yeah, that cricket doesn't want to be lunch, huh? Oh, there he goes.
Well, now that he's getting more comfortable with the stage, we're gonna have to spend a little bit more time moving him back around to get him in full view of y'all.
All right, I think everyone enjoys seeing him move around a little bit.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. We've got Steven. He'd like to know, does he eat small animals like mice or other frogs and toads?
That's a very good question. Since these are very large-bodied toads, they actually are known to eat small mice. Rats may be a little bit big for them, but any juveniles or young rats they could probably take a bite out of if they were feeling extra hungry. Now these guys will only eat a few times a week, but they'll eat a lot when they do. So for an animal like, there we go, great job, Eric. For an animal like a small mouse, that would probably satiate them for a few days. It's a very large meal, and they probably wouldn't eat a lot of them. However, they are known to do so.
All right, so we got the age-old question from Sidley, age 7. Can he hurt people?
Well, that is probably not true. I don't think that this guy could hurt somebody at all. Their toxins that they have inside their body are only active when they're being eaten. They won't be absorbed just by touching them. Mm-hmm. However, if you were to, which I also don't recommend, if you're able to eat an entire frog, you would probably feel very sick to your stomach and want to spend the rest of the day in bed, eating Tums and drinking lots of water. So I definitely don't recommend licking or eating frogs or trying to give them a kiss to turn them into a prince.
All right, note to self, ladies. Caitlin and Ian, who are regulars on this show, they want to know, is he covered in mud or is he just brown?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. So you might see a little bit of dirt on his skin and on the ground around him. That's actually coconut husk, which is ground down and mixed with water to turn into a very nice substrate. It's what he spends most of his day in, and he enjoys burrowing into it and waiting to hunt insects. However, as I said, he can burrow in a variety of substrates, and he likes moving around too.
There he goes.
Let's see, there we go.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
medicine.
Eric. All right, well, I think it's about time for us to move into some conservation questions.
All right.
So a few things about amphibian conservation. Amphibians are actually one of the groups of species which is most highly listed on the IUCN Red List. This means that a large majority of the species that we know about, which are amphibians, are near threatened, endangered, or critically endangered. This means that their wild populations are declining quickly, and they have some threat in those populations, which makes it difficult for them to recover and build back. Now, these guys, smooth-sided toads, are not endangered or threatened. They're very robust, and they have a large population. However, as I said earlier, they're scientists where they're often used in laboratory experiments to help understand the breeding capabilities of other species which are endangered. Here in North America, we have several species of endangered frogs. and toads, most notably found in Wyoming and Colorado, the mountain toad, and several other species such as the dusky gopher frog in Mississippi and Louisiana. So I would love to talk about some ways that you can help protect frog populations at home. One of the most important ways you can do that is by being aware of what chemicals that you're putting into their natural environment. Frogs are very sensitive species. They absorb nutrients and water through their skin. Whoa, very active guy. Nice jump, Eric. Here you go. He's still on camera, I believe.
He is still on camera now.
Perfect. So if you use any harsh fertilizers, insecticides, or herbicides, these can be absorbed through their skin. We at the Memphis Zoo would highly recommend not dumping bleach or any other chemicals into storm drains or your yard. And be careful when you're painting to make sure that you reduce the amount of paint that drips into your yard. Because frogs are active at night, you often won't see where they go, and they can travel several miles just in one night trying to find sources of fresh water to either reproduce or rehydrate themselves.
Wow, so like, what about things like, they say to get rid of weeds, you put vinegar in your yard. Are things like that safe to do, or is that actually going to hurt our little amphibian friends here?
Well, vinegar is definitely better. They don't have some of those harsh chemicals, and vinegar is actually very alkaline, which can help return some nutrients to the soil. So I would definitely recommend vinegar. I actually was unaware of that method to help reduce weeds.
I read that on Pinterest, everyone, so as the moderator, I'm not totally sure if it works. I've never tried it myself, but I've heard good things. Maybe we'll report back.
Yeah. Well, some of the other things that you can do in your yard to help frog populations is to leave fresh water sources for them to breed in and use. And if you do need to use mosquito repellent or anything like that, make sure it's non-aerosol and or water-based, so you can apply it directly to your skin instead of having to mist your entire backyard. In addition, these guys have a pretty important ecological role as pest controllers. They actually can eat a large amount of insects in one day, many of which can be harmful to native species, such as the Japanese beetle, which is an invasive species.
Well, we do have a fun question here. Is it true that toads, hop, and frogs leap different style of legs?
Yes, as you can see, he's leaping there. He is not able to get as much vertical motion when he bounds, and that's definitely a big part of distinguishing between frogs and toads is their locomotion or movement. It's a very good observation.
And so before we wrap this up, so we are getting to time, tell us a little bit more about that safe water in the backyard. Like, how can we help? Like, what would I do if I had my kids at home and wanted to create a safe little environment for them to come and breed in?
Well, definitely now is the perfect time to start. Frog breeding season is riding upon us, and if you hear chirps or ribbits at night, you definitely have some frogs which are sharing your backyard, in which case I would provide them with some sort of clean water. If you're using tap water, what you can do is let it sit out for about a day before putting it out into your yard. In a small bird bath you could just put right on the ground. They would love that. But also many frog species enjoy brackish water, which can be like muddy, filled with algae and weeds, and a nice biosphere for their larvae to hatch into, and so they can eat and have enough nutrients to metamorphose into a full adult frog or toad. In addition, some of the things that you can do is provide them with a sort of a safe cover. They enjoy a lot of times to burrow into places like leaf litter. So if you're mowing your lawn, try to use it as high as possible setting to give them some grass to move around in and hunt for insects. In addition, try to just reduce the amount that you disturb in your lawn. If you're playing around in there, make sure you're not destroying the ground cover or chopping down weeds in such a way that it ruins the soil or pushes too many species out of using their habitat.
Okay, well, we got one final question, guys, and we're going to let our friend Eric go back inside. What is their favorite food to eat, and how do they hunt?
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. One, because he's done with his lunch for today. He's fed crickets. Crickets are definitely his favorite food. However, he also enjoys a type of invertebrate called a superworm, which is a larva which will turn into a different species. And secondly, when he hunts, he's what's called an opportunistic predator, which means he can sit in one spot and wait for his prey to come to him. This means that he could sit in one small burrow or hole for an entire night and catch up to a dozen or even more insects if he's feeling really hungry, which is a great help to us because it reduces those pest insect populations. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. With that, I want to thank you all for tuning in and learning about how you can help conserve amphibian species here at home. And Eric, I'm sure he's just itching to get back in the mud. So thank you and have a good day.
That's the Hot Dog Camera.